You're listening to the Imprint Podcast. I'm your host, Micah, and today's episode is titled The Road Not Taken. This poem is written by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down for one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy, and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them, really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So that was kind of difficult to read, with it being written in kind of Old English. But I thought about this one mainly because I read this and I had to pick this poem apart when I was in high school, and I just loved the overall theme and message of it. And I was trying to find something for today, being Writer's Block Wednesday, and I was trying to find one about spring and grass and all of that wasn't corny. But for some reason this one just kept coming up, and so I was like, okay. And I read it and I was like, okay, this is kind of what I want. And I wanted to try to talk about, the changing of seasons, going from winter into spring, and kind of like transition, but without reading a basic poem about winter changing into spring, if that makes any sense. After I read this, I kind of got a little bit of a revelation. And it ties perfectly into what I wanted to talk about. So I'm excited about that. As many of you may or may not know, Robert Frost is a famous poet. He won very many awards, and he's very popular within the writing community. And this is one of my favorite poems he's written. It's very short, but it tells a very interesting story. And it's a story that easily ties in with a story from the Bible. So I don't know, I can't speak on what his mindset was from this poem, if he was thinking about that Bible verse or what his relationship with God was like, but I know how God can speak through anything and use anything. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first stanza says, two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. So it's starting out, you have two roads. You're in the woods, and clearly you cannot walk both trails at the same time. And basically he's saying like he is the only one in these woods. So like there's nobody to say, hey, do you know what's at the end of that road? Do you know what's at the end of that road? It's just him in these winding woods. And he's saying like, I'm looking as far as I can, being the only one here, trying to see, okay, which one looks more interesting or which one looks more appealing to me. And he can't see. The second stanza says, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy, and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. So he's come to the conclusion that I can only travel on one of them, and one looks like nothing has ever touched it, no one's ever walked it. It looks like it wants to be traveled on, it wants wear. But then he's looking again and he's like, the other one also kind of looks like, even though it's been worn, it also wants to be traveled on as well. But he took the one that looked less walked on, less traveled on, and said, I'm just going to go with this road. The third stanza says, and both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So this is him saying, basically, I'm going to walk this road and I'll save the other road for another day. But as he's looking and walking, he's like, I don't know if I'll ever be back because I don't know how long this road is. I don't know where I'll end up. And I don't know if I'd want to come back to even travel the next road or see what the other road has to offer. The last stanza says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So this is him saying, I am happy with my choice of traveling on this particular road, and I made a good decision going on this road with it not being touched and looking like it's never been explored before. And he's happy with the outcome of traveling that road. Before I kind of dive into this, I want to read the Bible verse that pops up in my brain. And many of you are probably thinking about the same one. But it's Matthew chapter 7, 13 and 14. And it is the story that Jesus tells of the narrow and the wide gates. So it says, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. And this is the NIV version. So it is March, and we are about to say goodbye to the winter. We're about to come into a new season of life. We're about to come into new weather, a lot of new things. One thing about coming into a new season is you have a choice. You can either move forward into a new frame of mind, a new job, a new house, a new car, or you can choose to stay stagnant in what was the past, what was the winter, what was the season before. And it's scary when you are faced with these two options, because one of them is something that you already know and the other one is something completely unknown. And we find ourselves at this crossroads in plenty different times in our lives. And this poem is a perfect representation of when you are faced with a known and an unknown. Or if you're faced with two unknowns, but one you know a little bit about and one you just know completely nothing of. And when you don't have God leading and guiding you, the fear can sometimes overtake you and make you resort to, I'm just going to say what I'm comfortable with or what I know or what looks like has been done before. I personally can resonate with that because this is something that I've never done before. I've never done a podcast. I've never shared my writing. There's so many people that have known me for years that didn't even know that I like to write. And I was like, I'm just going to stick with what's comfortable and live my life and not worry about people ever finding out that I like to write and, all of that stuff. But God was calling me to take this route. And it has been a journey already. And thinking about how I've been doing this for almost a month now is crazy to me because it shows how much time flies, but it also shows how much progress I made on this journey as opposed to how far along I would be if I didn't decide to follow what God was telling me to do. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to take the road less traveled. In the poem, obviously Robert is saying that he does not regret taking the road that's less traveled. And some people get the road less traveled confused with or the difficult road or the bad road or, the painful road. Not to say that those themes don't come up when you're taking the road less traveled, but that is not the end goal of taking the road less traveled. It's about enjoying the journey and taking in all of the things that come with it. If you're taking the easy way out, then you don't learn, you don't grow. You may be quicker to reaching your goal, but you'll find yourself running and chasing something that you could have gotten had you traveled a road that made you go through stuff and appreciate more things. And so in Matthew, when Jesus is talking about the narrow gate and the narrow road, he's saying that if you choose to take the broad gate and the wider road, you'll be overcome with all types of distraction. You'll be overcome with fear. You'll be overcome with listening to other people. And it won't be as meaningful to you as if you take the narrow road. Ooh, that's hard to say. Where all you have to listen to is God's voice. And not many people want to take that road because they're afraid of what God is going to have them do. They don't know if they're going to be equipped enough, and they don't think it will be the popular choice. Sometimes the narrow gate is a lonesome time. Sometimes you'll be by yourself. People will look at you weird and talk about you and say you're crazy and not want to have anything to do with you. And sometimes that can deter people because they want to be liked, they want to be accepted, they want to be loved, and they want to be pleased by knowing that everybody is for them. But even Jesus had to travel by himself. He could have easily just said, me and all my might, all of you are healed and free, and I'm going to go back to heaven now. But he was like, no, I'm going to choose to follow what my Father is saying, and I'm going to die on this cross, and I'm going to die the painful death so that everybody can be free. And so it's basically saying in both the poem and in the Bible, don't take the shortcut. There's no shortcuts with God, because everything he has you going through has a lesson and a blessing and a teachable moment. And it's not just for you, it's also to minister and share with others. And so you miss out on all of those other blessings and other outcomes of favor when you are so focused on the end goal and just wanting to get there. I'm learning that going through this journey, because I so bad want to be in a place where I have all the money and I'm living comfortable and I can start a family and get married and do all the things. But God is like, think about where I have you now and occupy where I have you now. And if I didn't have that mindset, I'd be missing out on all of the little things that I have in my life right now that are a blessing to me, and how I'm also being a blessing to others. I want to kind of reference the saying, stop and smell the roses. No pun intended with it being springtime. But take a break. Take a moment to really reflect on what God has you going through. Figure out what the lesson is. Figure out what the goal is. Figure out what you're trying to accomplish. Figure out where the blessing is. And take time to thank God that, yes, you could have chosen the easier route, but you are learning to be more appreciative and thankful by taking the harder way, by taking the more winding course. There is so much more reward in taking that longer way than it is with taking the shorter way. I want to be able to say I have no regrets in the journey that I'm on, because I don't ever want to get so far off the track to where I'm starting to lean more towards the broader gate and being consumed in self-gain and, what makes me comfortable, rather than taking God's way and pleasing him and doing stuff for his kingdom and being a light. I want to be able to say that I did that. I don't want to be able to say, yeah, I'm rich and famous and it's because I decided to compromise my soul. Notice how there is nothing wrong with being rich and famous, but to what cost, to what avail? If God is making that way for me, then I know I'm going to be good. I know I'm going to be satisfied. If God is not making that way for me and I'm trying to push that agenda on my own, I'm going to fall short. I'm going to sin. I'm going to allow myself to do things that could have been avoided that might be so much more costly. That is not what I want. I want what God has set for me, even though it may, cost me some friendships. It may cost me a job that I really want. It may cost me a place that I really want to live at. If it's in God's will, I know I'm going to be okay. And I know at the end of the day, I'm going to reach the goal that He has set for me. So I really enjoy when I'm reading something that may not have any godly concept or Christian pretense, and I can easily relate it to something that God has spoken to me or has written in His Word, because it shows that, you know, He can really use anything. God can use anything to bring about His message and His purpose. And it's just really amazing to me. So why is this poem important, and how can we learn from it? I think this poem by Robert Frost is important because it's going to help you keep things in perspective and keep you grounded, to know that yes, I may be traveling a more difficult way, but it doesn't mean that I'm missing out on what the broader way might look like. And you know, like the Bible says, not very many people take that way. Very few people find it because they're looking for a get rich quick, or they're looking for just an overall easier way. And I think we can learn from this when we're starting our lives and we're starting to live our lives solely for Christ, because we can easily learn from how Jesus lived. He has so many reasons and options and opportunities to be deceived and to be tempted by the devil. And the Bible talks about it in so many ways. And Jesus stood firm and said, no, I'm not going to be tempted. I'm not going to let the devil win. I'm not going to be deceived by his devices. And so we can learn from that and saying, when that narrow road gets tough, because it will, I can stand firm and know that God has me the entire way. And I have nothing to be afraid of. And I can just weather any type of storm. So again, it is Writer's Block Wednesday, and I do have a prompt for you all to listen to, and if you feel led to write, you can write to it. The prompt is, how do you handle change? And I have a picture on Pinterest, and it's 100 writing prompts, and I was scrolling through looking, and that one just was the one that stuck out to me. And I was like, oh, this is perfect, because the theme of today is change, and coming into a new season and figuring out, how do you handle when you go through something that is going to change you. I think everyone should ask that question to themselves and really reflect on that, even if you don't write to it, because it is a new season and God is requiring different things of all of us. And it's fine to know that, but how are you going to handle it? Are you going to be upset? Are you going to murmur? Are you going to complain? Or are you going to persevere? Are you going to pray? Are you going to have faith? Those are all things that we need to ask ourselves so that we can be equipped and know how to, move forward. So I hope that you enjoyed this written piece of the journey, and I hope that I can inspire you to write your own, and I will talk to you in the next episode.